because we know, as I said, 10 postcodes, 36 suburbs are about to enter 4 weeks of lockdown across Melbourne. They can't leave their home. There's only 4 reasons why they can: food and other essential items, to exercise only for about an hour, medical care or caregiving, as we know, to go to work if it's essential, or school. You thought this was all behind you, Victoria? Well, it is not. Joining me now, the Leader of the Opposition in Victoria, Michael OBrien from Melbourne. OK, a big announcement today, Michael OBrien. What do you make of it tonight?
Peter, this is really a failure of leadership. I mean, all Victorians expect, the least Victorians deserve to expect from their Premier is competence. What we've seen is a failure of competence, because the Premier has even admitted that it was breakdowns in hotel quarantine, which only happen in Victoria, which has led to this virus spreading throughout the suburbs and has led to a further lockdown. The Premier's been blaming families. He's been blaming young people. He's been blaming everybody but looking in the mirror. But in fact, it's been his own government's incompetence which has let this virus spread, and now we are facing a second lockdown. My heart goes out to those families, those small businesses who have been hanging by a thread, and now they're back in lockdown jail.
I listened carefully to the Premier's press conference and the question and answer session. He was asked a number of times why on earth Victoria Police wasn't managing hotel quarantine in Victoria like it is in other states. Like New South Wales learnt from Ruby Princess that it had to come away from outsourced entities and to Victoria Police. He didn't give an adequate answer, and he talked about having an inquiry into it. Do we know why the Victoria Police was not involved running quarantine in Victoria?
Well, that really lies at the heart of the question, Peter. We had poorly trained, lowly paid and, frankly, completely unqualified people running hotel quarantine. Not only did they not stop return travellers from moving around, but they actually picked up the virus themselves. They spread it amongst themselves, they took it home, they spread it to their families. That's been this major source of outbreak, the largest source of outbreak since the Cedar Meats scandal. So this has to go to the heart of this inquiry. But frankly, Daniel Andrews, he can try and duck shove all he likes. He can try and throw his ministers under a bus, as we understand his media people are trying to do at the moment. Ultimately, when you're a leader, the buck stops with you. Daniel Andrews has allowed this to get out. He's allowed it to start as a second wave. And ultimately, he's responsible to Victorians for this complete and utter disaster.
I also thought it was interesting when he talked about the genome testing that had enabled him to isolate quite a lot of this outbreak, certainly in the past weeks. It wasn't necessarily immediately today, but the past weeks of outbreak, to the security guards, and it's all done by DNA testing, as he said. He had that work done. He talked, quite happily about how complex it was. He'd organised that a number of days ago. If he knew that there was this risk of an outbreak connected to security guards, if he knew the scale, and he obviously did to order this special testing, why then on Monday did he knock back all the additional ADF resources?
Well, Peter, that is the great unknown. And what we do know is that Daniel Andrews specifically requested 850 ADF personnel to assist with things, including hotel quarantine. Between making that request,
so why knock them back?
Well, that's the thing. Between making that request and then rescinding that request, what do we know? We know there was a crisis meeting of the Cabinet Committee. We know that Graham Ashton, the outgoing police chief, expressed public concern about the idea of working with ADF. I think this was a turf war within the Labor government. I think it was fighting between the Premier, the Health Minister and the Police Minister. They have completely neglected public safety. This is all about their own turf. And in the end, Victorians were left with a substandard, poorly trained, unqualified private security mob running hotel quarantine, and that's why we're in the mess we are. Premier should have swallowed his pride and said, please, Prime Minister, please send us 850 trained ADF personnel at no expense to the Victorian taxpayer, mind you, to do the job properly. He didn't do that, and that's why it's where we are today.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. And of course, you've got residents across other parts of Victoria, regional Victoria, who will be hit hard by these closures tonight, and businesses who are scaling up now, going back into lockdown. Michael OBrien, just one last comment. How do you think the Premier's standing in all of this is with Victorians? He's had obviously branch stacking issues and other things. Has he been distracted? Is that the problem?
I think that goes to a lot of it, Peter. This is a Premier who's been leading the Labor Party for 10 years and pretends he's had nothing to do with the culture of corruption and misconduct we've seen exposed in recent weeks. He's been completely obsessed with securing his own power within the Labor Party at the expense of his factional rivals. Frankly, he's taken his eye off the ball. I think that is exactly why Victoria alone is facing a lockdown. Victoria, beautiful one day, pariah the next. And I feel so sorry for those Victorians who wanted to go on holidays, those Victorian small businesses who were relying on an easing of restrictions, not going back to where we were months ago.
Michael O'Brien, Victorian Opposition Leader, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thanks, Peter.